All right. Okay, good morning again. So, good morning to all of you who are here, and thank you for staying, and for those who are joining from home. I've got a PowerPoint that has a selection of pictures from everything we did. And again, we had so many pictures that trying to find a few. Hopefully these kind of are the highlights, and I think covered most of the bigger things we did. The girls have some things they want to talk about with some of the things we did, so they'll come up when we get and share their thoughts on some of those when we get to them. So then if you're ready, go ahead and start going through them. So the first portion of the sabbatical was my hiking in the Smokies, and you can go ahead and kind of go on to the next one, Ethan. Just a few of the shots from some of the pictures I took when I got down to the Smokies. That's the closest I got to a bear. I saw 5 of them on a driving loop through Cades Cove the evening I got there, and again, that's the closest I got, which was fine. I did see one when the day that I was leaving, and I was driving along, and I looked down a road to the side, and there was one walking right down the middle of the road, but there were cars behind me, so I just kept going. If you've been to the Smokies, maybe some of this looks familiar, but it's just absolutely gorgeous with scenery like this at every turn. When I got on the Appalachian Trail, one of the things that's unique to the Appalachian Trail are those white marks on that tree. They're called a blaze. And so those blazes are painted on trees and rocks and things periodically to help mark the path and keep you headed in the right direction, because other trails are marked with blue blazes. So if you get off, and sometimes you'll see a blue one or a white one with a blue either right beside it or below it that says, oh, we've got 2 trails that are overlapping, but they're fairly far apart. So thankfully it's a well-worn trail, but those help keep you on your path. It's just a kind of a glimpse of what the trail looks like in a lot of places. People that through hike the Appalachian Trail talk about that there are sections of it that they just refer to as the green tunnel. As you can see, it is very green, and while the trees aren't hanging in very tight on that particular portion, one of the things that really struck me on the Appalachian Trail was how much the flora changed from one mountain peak, and you'd go down a little bit and then come up on the next, and you'd go from green leafy trees like we have around here to thick pines with everything covered with moss under it, to places where the rhododendrons were so thick that it really was a tunnel carved through them, and they'd have a kind of a tropical look to them. Just some of the markings and things along the trail, and I think that was the first sign I came to that actually said Appalachian Trail, so that's why I took the picture of it. So that's Rocky Top. So while you're in the mountains, there aren't a lot of places where you actually have it open up, where you have these views of the hills and other mountains around. Rocky Top was the first peak that I came to, I guess, on the Appalachian Trail, and then followed by Thunderhead. And so again, another sweeping landscape, and even for that mountain and valley that you see, no picture does any of this justice. Clingman's Dome is the highest point on the Appalachian Trail, and it's that curved arch. There's an observation tower on the top of Clingman's Dome if you've ever been there, but it's people can drive and walk up to it, or the Appalachian Trail comes into it. And so I hiked up to there, and then doubled back and went back and kind of headed back down into the valley toward where my car was parked, but wanted to at least get to that point on the Appalachian Trail before I headed down into the valley once again. Clingman's Dome is about 6,400 feet. So I think it's the highest point on the Appalachian Trail, and I believe it's the 3rd highest point east of the Mississippi. This is what the shelters looked like along the Appalachian Trail. So they're fairly sturdy, but it is only enclosed really on kind of 2.5 sides. The picture's not real clear, but there's on the outside portion of it, there's kind of a table with built-in benches along it. And then when you go back into it further, they're basically a pallet the whole length of it. So there's a wooden floor that's about 2 feet off the ground that goes from one side to the other. And then at about 4 feet above that, there's another one. So the capacity is 16 people. And if it's 16 people, you're kind of laying in there shoulder to shoulder. And it's pretty tight. I was in one of them that was pretty full. The first night, it was me and 3 other gentlemen that shared it, so we had plenty of space and no concerns. That white paper that's attached to the post right there is a warning of bear activity in the area, and just about every shelter had those. Thankfully, none of the shelters that I was scheduled to stay at were closed due to that, but again, the only ones I saw were through the car window, so that worked out all right. However, there was other wildlife that I encountered, and that was my very first day of hiking, and that was about a 4-foot timber rattlesnake. And from behind it is uphill. So I had just gone up that trail up to where the shelter was, took off my pack and set it down and got my water collection stuff because I had to come back down this trail to where the spring was to get water. And as I'm walking along, where its tail is on the left there, I just saw a snake head sticking out at the edge of the trail. And so I walked way over through the weeds over there around it and came down here and just watched. And it just kind of meandered on across and on up the hill. And once my heart rate came down to something below 200, I got my water and went back up to the camp. That was the only one I saw, but a day or two later, I did pass a couple of women who were coming toward me, and I stopped to get out of their way so they could go past on the trail. And they said, by the way, they said, we'd been seeing things about it on the hiking app that we use, but about 10 minutes up here, we saw a rattlesnake just like right at the edge of the trail that was probably 6 feet long. So I went a little further and sat down and ate my lunch and decided I guess I can't stay here forever. So I had a set of trekking poles with me that are kind of like ski poles. And you saw that one area where there's the trail and everything's kind of grown in. Well, that's about how it was. And they said the snake was right at the edge. So I had my trekking poles in front of me walking along like this. And they'd said it was about 10 minutes up. And I think about a half hour later, I finally decided I could just use my trekking poles normally again. Not a fan of snakes, if I haven't mentioned it, but it was still impressive to see. So, and that's the last day. I actually shortened my hike by a day. The last night there was a thunderstorm rolling in, and it rained all night on us in the shelter. And so, thankfully, we were in the shelter, and it was dry. But it was a thick fog the next morning and cold. And so, I hiked about 14 miles. Coming down, and thankfully it was mostly downhill. The downside to that was that you can see I was glad to get my boots off on the little concrete bumper when I got to my car. Apparently my boots weren't quite the right fit, or the 14 miles downhill didn't help, but over the course of the summer I ended up losing both of my big toenails. So that happens, and I had some pretty bad blisters because I had a recommendation for a certain type of tape to use that was supposed to be really good and stick really well. It did, but apparently I'm allergic to it. So my little blisters from rubbing became an enormous blister anywhere that there was tape contacting my skin. So it was an unpleasant couple of weeks when we started the next portion of our sabbatical. So June then was 3 weeks in Florida. That's us loaded in the car. Kate was not able to participate with us. Kate needed to work, and we'd made some reservations. So actually for the first part of our trip to Florida, because we had tickets and things already booked for some of the parks and things, you can't see her well, she'll be in some of the other pictures, but Anna, one of her friends from school, was able to go with us. So there's our Disney iconic picture, I guess, with the Magic Kingdom in the background. Yes, after Anna and her friend like hit the park and were just gone. So we said, all right, well, we knew they'd get hungry and they'd find us eventually. So the first one was Magic Kingdom. That's Hollywood Studio on the left, and I think the photo on the right is the ferry going over to the Magic Kingdom. We did all of the Disney parks. I think the next one has Epcot on it, I believe. Nope, that's the Typhoon Lagoon, which is one of Disney's water parks. And so it was nice to, what's that? Blizzard Beach, there we go. Thank you. See, that's why you're here. You got to keep me honest. But it was really hot. We've not been to Florida this time in June, and it was nice to be able to go there and just relax and refresh a little bit. There's Epcot. So we did all of the theme parks. The Animal Planet, we ended up only spending Animal Kingdom. See, thank you. We only spent a very short time there, and really we only had like one or two pictures that weren't that good from there because we got there and it was crowded, and we went back and we did the safari ride, and we got off and everybody was just standing around, and we're like, okay, what's going on? And they have an app and you can see how long the wait time is for different rides and attractions and stuff. Well, suddenly it was like 3 hours or more for everything. Well, come to find out, they lost power at the park. So after about an hour and a half of wandering around and nothing happening except a couple of Donald Duck costumed people on a pontoon boat that was circling in the moat in the middle playing music, there was nothing to do. So we went back over to Blizzard Beach and hung out there for the day and played in the water. Some more Disney pictures. The Cece and Mallory, they had Disney-themed costumes for every day that kind of went along with the parks. So their blue outfits they're wearing are Anna and Elsa from Frozen, and you can't see it real well, I don't think, in the picture, but the topiaries are the sisters from the movie Frozen. We had a house that we'd rented through VRBO it was in Kissimmee, and so it had a lanai and a pool at it, so that was nice too. The girls got plenty of use out of it when we'd go back for the evening and relax. All right, Mallory wanted to talk about this. Discovery Cove was one of her high points. If you want to go ahead and advance a couple, there she is. There you go. What do you want to say about Discovery Cove? What was your favorite part?
We went swimming with dolphins, and there was a saltwater aquarium with a bunch of different fish and stingrays, and we got snorkels, and we got to swim with them.
All right. Thank you, Mallory. So we all got to get in and see the dolphins. You can tell Anna's thrilled. We all are swimming with it, getting towed through the water. Mallory had mentioned it, but the other thing, we had some videos that we took, but the videos were too large to put into here, but they have it is like a wave pool kind of that has sand and stuff in it, but it has stingrays and fish and schools of them just swimming around, and you can put a mask on, and the stingrays have been debarbed, but they're big stingrays just going back and forth, and when you go down there to dive, they'll come by and you can just touch them as they go past. So it was really neat to be able to see and interact with a lot of the things there. There weren't any pictures that made it in, but we also, because of the Discovery Cove, when you get tickets there, it's part of the SeaWorld family. So we went to Aquatica, which is their water park one day, and we went to SeaWorld one day. And my takeaway from that is that my ability to tolerate roller coasters isn't what it used to be. Mallory wanted me to ride on one with her, and so I rode on her, and it wasn't too bad with it. And then we rode on the second one, and that one was the one that broke the camel's back, because I got off, and I was standing there, and it was a warm day, but I just started sweating buckets. And I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I need to sit down. Maybe I need to eat. Maybe I don't. I'm not sure what happened, but I think I'm done. So, yep. She was sitting next to me and she brushed against my arm. She's like, why are you so wet? I'm like, good question. So we enjoyed our time in Orlando. I know the girls particularly. Anna was disappointed I didn't throw any pictures in here, but she one of the things she did was go to Selfie World, and they have all kinds of scenes set up. And as it sounds like, it was about taking selfies, and she got some great ones and kind of her own photo shoot. So then we went from there over to Madeira Beach, which is on the Gulf Coast near Tampa Bay, and we had a condo that we'd stayed at there, and that was much more Melissa and I's pace of being able to just kind of relax. And so, darn it, we had to go to the beach and sit in the sand most days. So you can go ahead and kind of advance through some of those. Just, again, some of the pictures. You want to say anything about your board, Anna? She wanted one of those, I can't even think of the name of it now, skimmer boards. And it's if you've seen the kids, they throw it down on the water washes up into the sand, and where it's real thin, they throw it down on it and try and jump on it, and they skim across. So we ended up with a number of wipeouts and varying levels of success mastering that. Mine, not so much. So... that's from the balcony at our condo. Believe it or not, that purple was actually the color of the sunset the one night. And so we got to see some incredible sunsets. There was a tropical storm that was kind of working up along through the Gulf when we were there. So the Gulf was actually a lot rougher than it usually is. And we had red tide on top of that. So we had to kind of navigate based on where they said it was bad or not from one day to the next, which beaches we went to. So we had to do a little more driving around to get to beaches that weren't affected by it. But the first day we got there, we went down and had no idea, but we started walking along the beach and we're like, why are all these dead fish everywhere? Big ones, little ones, and it was bad. But because of that, there were some pretty good waves, and so the girls did some bodyboarding as well, and got pretty adept at it. More pictures of sand and sun, and we took a ferry out to Shell Key, and we got a bunch of shells, and it's supposed to be the place to go to get sand dollars. We saw a bunch of pieces, and we came home with one, right? Just one sand dollar from Florida? Yep. And then, yeah, Cece will talk a little bit more about sand dollars, though, because we actually found some more elsewhere. But that was a fun day to go out, and it was just kind of a key that you could only get to by ferry, so they took us out and dropped us off. And we didn't get close enough, but on the way back, there was actually, I don't know if they're called a pod, but I think there were 8 manatees that were swimming along, and you could see where they were, but they really didn't surface enough to be able to get any good pictures of them. But it was kind of neat seeing them as well. The girls had their sand stuff and did a lot of building and digging, collecting. You want to talk about this, Anna? All right.
So this is when we went parasailing. We got on a boat in like a little harbor, and they took us out into the ocean, and the ride out there was not very fun. It was very bumpy and windy, but we went like how far out? Like 2 miles out into the ocean, and we were the last ones in like the group to go, so we kind of got to see what it was going to be like before we got on. But then they let us out up into the sky, and I had the little GoPro, and all I was thinking about was not to drop it because we were never going to get that back. But how far up were we? The rope was 1,000 feet long. We were 400 feet up in the air, and that
little dot on the right is the parachute put down behind the boat.
Yeah, and then at the end, they dipped us down into the water, and they would slow down for a second so we could almost free fall a little bit, and then they would just speed back up. So, yeah.
When we were down on the deck waiting to go parasailing, there was a guy with the hose spraying off the jet skis, and then he sprayed me with the hose. And then we got on the boat, and before we went, we painted our fingernails and toenails. And then when we were about to go on the parasail, the guy on the boat said, "Ooh, yum, shark Skittles."
That deckhand looked at their toes and said, "Yep, those are shark Skittles." Well, that's just before they got dipped. All right. So while we were in Florida, Mallory, our girls are involved in a variety of athletics, and so Anna ran in the middle school state track meet just before I left to start my sabbatical. Cece had her state gymnastics meet just before we left, and then Mallory had her regional dive meet as well. Well, Mallory's dive coach knew that we were going to be gone for most of the summer with our renewal leave, and so we were in Florida, and Mallory's coach called Melissa and said, "Hey, just out of curiosity, where are you going to be on or around this date at the end of June?" And Melissa said, "Well, we'll be coming back from Florida." And I think Melissa had to hold the phone out when Mallory's dive coach started cheering. She said, "Is there any way you can stop in Knoxville?" So we ended up leaving a day early to go to Knoxville because after regionals is zones for the dive competition. And so we ended up going up and staying in Knoxville, and she dove at the University of Tennessee's natatorium. While we were there, since we were only 45 minutes from Gatlinburg and the Smoky Mountains, we actually, after her warm-up day, we drove down through the Smoky Mountain National Park, and I showed them kind of where I started my hiking and particularly where I finished. So we walked along the stream or creek coming down through there. Go ahead and advance a little bit, Ethan. So the girls got to play in the water. One of the things you may note, if there's water, our girls are probably in it. Yep, Mallory fell in that creek. So there's Mallory with her coach and the University of Tennessee. So she scored well enough that she qualified for nationals. Got 4th place, yep. So of course, when something good happens, you have to have ice cream. So it's an old-fashioned pharmacy soda stand that we stopped at in downtown Knoxville. So, and then for the second part, we did our travel. We'd originally scheduled going west to Seattle and down the Pacific coast to San Francisco. When back in the spring and February and March, when we needed to start booking and making reservations, we still weren't sure what travel restrictions were going to be like, or if we were going to feel up to getting on a plane at that point. So we actually flipped coasts and decided, you know what, we can go out to Maine and have similar types of experiences. And so we kind of rerouted things. And so on our New England leg, we visited Niagara, Stowe, Vermont, Acadia, Boston, Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Cape Cod. So that's all in 2 weeks. So again, we covered a lot of ground. I think between Florida was, I had it figured out. Florida was 3,210 miles of driving, and this New England trip was 3,270 miles of driving. So we put some miles on the rental vehicles. So first stop was Niagara Falls on the U.S. side, and some pictures of the sights and scenes there. We did do the Maid of the Mist boat ride down there. That's Anna in the middle. Again, another experience that she thoroughly enjoyed. She was worried about her hair and she was worried about her shoes that day. So we were in Niagara for 2 days. What's that? This was something Melissa looked forward to. And in Stowe, Vermont is where the Von Trapp family settled, and so it was rebuilt because there was a fire, but that's the Von Trapp family lodge. It's now like a hotel. So Melissa is a huge Sound of Music fan, and so we'd stop by there, and unfortunately things did not work out. Melissa was scheduled to have a spa day there while the girls and I went and did a zip lining thing. And I looked on the GPS and said, oh, they're only about 20 minutes apart. We'll go see where it's at, and then we'll drive over to the zip line, and then you can drive yourself back, and then when you're done, you can just come pick us up. Yes. So we've got an SUV that's basically a Suburban. And the thing is, while GPS said it's about 20 minutes away, what it didn't tell you was that you go over a mountain that involves a road that's only like a lane wide around these switchbacks, around boulders and stuff. And when we got over to where the zip lining was, Melissa said, I am not driving back over there. And unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to take her back and then get back for when our tour was scheduled. So she did not get to have her spa day. Were you going to say something about that? Or, okay, zip lining is next. Yep. If you've not been to Vermont, lots of big boulders.
We went on a 8 zip line and 2 rappel zip line course, and
Was it fast? Was it slow?
some of them were really fast, but one of them was slow. And they told us.
What'd you have to do to go fast enough to get over there since you're so small?
Since we're small, we had to lean back in a tuck, and then the guy who was there would push us off really hard, and then we'd go really fast, and it was very scary.
So some of the platforms they took the photos and said, all right, everybody lean to the one side like we're tipping, and some of those platforms were about 20 feet off the ground. Some of them were 50 feet up in a tree. I think the longest zip line was about 900 feet, and some other shorter ones, but. So one of the other, again, never a bad time for ice cream. So literally right next to the hotel we stayed at in Vermont is the original, or the main Ben & Jerry's factory. And so of course we had to go and try some ice cream. They weren't doing the tours, but they were still serving ice cream. So that was a hit.
Would any of you zip line again?
Absolutely.
Girls, would you?
Vermont was kind of, what's about halfway between Niagara and Maine, because we didn't think we wanted to drive all of that in one day. And so we had 2 nights in Vermont after we'd seen, where Stowe was and some of the things that were there. It wasn't necessarily one of our planned destinations, but I think all of us absolutely loved Vermont and thought we should have planned to stay here longer. And so between Lake Champlain and the area that we were in. Vermont is just a beautiful state, and we've said, all right, we're going to have to go back in the fall and see the leaves change. So this was a little place that we'd stopped for lunch. Anna really was having a good time. She was just messing around for that picture. But you can see, is that Cece, I think, down there in the water? Or is that, okay. So that stream down there, as soon as we sat down, Cece and Mallory were like, can we go down there and play? They're like, yeah, okay, sure. So they had to go down the embankment, and they're out there waiting around. And we're sitting there, and the waiter came by and brought water. And he said, I don't want to, freak you out, and it shouldn't be a problem, but there was a bear that we had to chase off about an hour ago. It probably won't come back. It didn't, but again, they really enjoyed. Did you want to say something about it, Cece? Yep. So Cece said the rocks were really slippery, and Mallory fell in first, and then Cece, and at that point, everybody was wet. So the morning that we were supposed to be leaving, we decided, you know what, we need to just go find somewhere to hike or walk around again, and just get a little bit more out of Vermont before we hit the road. And so we found a short trail that was a couple miles back to this waterfall. And so Cece and Mallory wore their swimsuits, and they were in and out. And I don't think I included a picture of it, but Cece was swimming in the pool right below the waterfall there, and we'd hiked along the trail that kind of went up along there. And all right. So on from there, we drove to Acadia National Park in Maine, and that's the cabin that we stayed at for a week while we were there. You got some stuff to say about it? The hiking or this part? All right.
So in Maine, there was more rocks and water, so in front of the house. So
Go to the next slide. So that's the view from the deck on our cottage.
So throughout the days we were there, we found 13 sand dollars there, and we saw a jellyfish and a starfish.
Okay. Those will come up in some pictures. So that was the first picture was a sunrise out across the view we have. That was a sunset one evening. With the harbor up there, in Florida, you've got the tides that come in. And so, you might have to move your lounge chair back or down if you want to get a little closer to the water, but it's not that far. But in Bar Harbor and around Acadia, the tides are about 9 feet from high tide to low tide, and that happens twice a day that it changes that much. And so part of what you see down there, it wasn't a sandy beach. It was like broken up, flat, like shale rock or chunks of granite and stuff. So it was really rocky. But like Cece was saying, when the tide would go out, I had no idea that there were even sand dollars in water that far north or that cold. But how many did we find, Cece? 13? Yeah. So we found one sand dollar in Florida, but we found 13 of them right there in front over the days that we were there. So beachcombing at the park in Acadia was one of our high points. The girls did get in and swim one day. And when I say swim, it was wade in and wade out because it was cold water. And it was hot enough that on the news, they actually were having warnings telling people, yes, we know it's hot outside, but if you spend too much time in the water, you will get hypothermia. And so they got in and they decided, yeah, that's not swimming water. So some of the finds at the beach. These are some of the views then. That's Thunder Hole is one of the attractions on the loop around Acadia where it comes in. The tides weren't right or at the right time for it to be making any noise when we were there, but still a good view of the ocean. And So Bar Harbor, didn't know until we were there, the reason it's called Bar Harbor is there's this sandbar that at low tide connects to that island to the mainland. So at high tide, it just looks like harbor and water all the way across. When the tide goes out, you can walk all the way across to that island out there. And so we did that one afternoon. Some lighthouses and Maine lobster. Okay. Wait, come here, Cece. Oh, yep. Walking across that sandbar was a opportunity to learn how to skip rocks. So we went on a nature cruise around the harbor, so had to wear a mask inside the cabin, but then when you were out on the deck of the ship in the open air, you didn't have to. So we spent most of our time in the open air. Come on up, Mel. Can't see them real well. The upper picture, there are some seals, gray seals laying on those rocks up there, and then the lighthouse with a bunch of birds around it.
When we were on the boat, there's like a speaker where the person would talk into it and like say on the south side there's like a bunch of seals. And at one time, I was outside standing with my parents, and he said, "Look over there, there's a once-in-a-lifetime sighting of an eagle." And then I whispered over to my mom, "We see this every day at the lake house."
So for our renewal leave, since we have a lake cottage, our time that we weren't traveling or going somewhere, we spent at the lake. And our lake's only 140 acres, and it's a 10-mile-an-hour lake, but we've got a lot of wildlife there. So on this nature cruise in Maine on the harbor, they were talking about the bald eagles, and like Mallory said, we've got a nesting pair at the lake. So they're like, "Oh, most of you have probably never seen this, but look, and there's the nest, and there's their babies." And Mallory's like, "Yeah, we see that all the time." And then the peregrine falcon, not peregrine, ospreys, were out there fishing, and she was talking about, "Oh, these are so neat, and they're the master fishers and stuff." And well, we've got a nesting pair of those at our lake as well. So we've seen them doing their thing up there as well. But it still was a neat way to see part of Acadia that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. That's from Cadillac Mountain, so it's the highest point in Acadia. Because it's the highest point in Acadia, it is the first place that sunlight hits in the continental United States. They have, because there's so many people visiting the national parks now, a lot of these things you actually have to make a reservation or sign up for a time slot, and they go very quickly. So to get up there to see the sunrise, you need to get in line at 4 o'clock in the morning, and 3 days ahead of time, you have to put your name in the queue to be able to get a spot to get in line to go up there at 4 a.m. Well, those were gone in like the first minute that it opened up, and so we didn't go to see a sunrise, but we went up there in the evening, and so instead of looking east to watch the sunrise, we looked off the other side of the mountain to watch the sunset. And it's tall enough, and with the wind up there, it was quite a bit cooler than it was at other places in the park while we were there. So there's Cece. Cece likes being outdoors, but she really discovered her love for hiking while we were in Maine as well. You want to come and talk about it? Do you have anything you want to say? Or do you want to talk about Ozarks? That's the day that you and I went before the perpendicular trail. Okay. She wants to talk about the other hiking. So Cece and I, Dave Almdale had mentioned the perpendicular trail, that we needed to find it. So Corinne was going to go with me, and so we got up one morning and thought, well, let's go do this early while everybody else is still sleeping in, and then we'll come back and do whatever else for the day. So we drove down, and where my one map said it was, and we got to the parking area, and we couldn't find a trailhead anywhere. So we went over to another pond area that we had seen and knew there were some trails at. So we hiked there that morning. So this was the one that Cece and I did the one morning. Go ahead, Ethan. This one, that middle picture, there were some really steep areas, and so that's actually a metal ladder that's bolted to the rock face to get up. And I think, were there 4 sets of ladders that we had to do on that one? Yeah, so then that's her standing out on that rock part. It was just a little bit off the trail. It was foggy, or the clouds were low enough that when we hiked, we were hiking in fog, and then we actually got up above the clouds that morning that had kind of settled in around that. So then that, one of the afternoons then after Cece and I had hiked, we went back and we all hiked around Jordan Pond. That's one of the kind of iconic places to visit in Acadia. Those boardwalks that are apparently a fairly new addition. There's so much traffic around it that it was really doing a lot of wear and tear on the terrain and affecting the trees and things. So they actually have these plank boardwalks that go almost halfway around it on the one side. And it's not too bad, except that there's two-way traffic. And so at least they have these little platforms where you can kind of step off to the side to allow other people to pass. And then the next day we figured out, and I got a better map that showed us where to find the perpendicular trails. So, all right. While Anna's coming up, you can see on the left-hand photo, it really had to have been an engineering marvel for them to put it in, because they have these rocks cut and stacked where at least half of it, it's just like stair steps going up the side of the mountain. But you're going up the side of a mountain.
So I actually didn't even want to go. I was forced to go, and I only agreed because I got a donut after. And I knew we were going to be out there for a couple of hours, so while they're getting their hats and bug spray, I'm getting my snacks. Because the whole way up, I was eating and drinking, because it just passed the time faster. And they're all over there, like, losing their breath, but... Well, he's losing his breath, and I'm eating my crackers, and I say, "You want some?" He goes, "Not unless you want to see me puke." And I was like, well, okay. It actually ended up being really fun, but tiring. Okay, Cece, you want to say something?
When we were a little ways up, like it was almost like a little more than half, Anna said, "Shoot, I should have brought more snacks."
Yeah, we were 1/4 of the way up, and I was already out of snacks, and at this point, I was licking the bag of Doritos I had in my pocket.
We didn't put a lot of pictures in, but the grant covered our travel and our meals and things like that. And as we were coming back, we had to tell the girls, okay, for one, when we get home, we're not going to be eating out this much. 2, every meal is not going to have appetizers with it. And 3, not every meal gets dessert either. So, and and our next vacation won't be like this either. So when we left Acadia, we went down, and we just spent an afternoon in Boston. And Melissa had wanted to do this, but she'd been looking into it. And so we walked the Freedom Trail, and the gentleman in costume on the right is, what was his name? Otis? James Otis. No idea who he was. And after hearing about him, I'm going to have to get a book and read a little bit more about him. But half of the famous sayings, like a man's home is his castle and things like that, were James Otis, who was an attorney and very influential on a lot of the founding fathers.
We walked like an hour or two. An hour and a half. And towards the middle, we went into this graveyard to walk around. We were halfway through, and then we were almost at this grave, and then I looked at it, and I said, "That says James Otis. How are you here if your grave's right there?" And then a little bit later, towards the end, we were walking, and then we saw these people on like scooters rolling around, and then Anna said, "Why couldn't we have done that? We've been walking the entire time." And at the end, we went over, and there were these like 6 street performers, like 6 men or something, or 4, and they were like, one of them did a flip over 6 men, and he did a flip over 2 kids. I wish I got a flip over because the kids got $10 bills.
It's easy. Yeah, James Otis enjoyed having Mallory and Cece in his tour group. So, well, let's see. Yeah, that's the what's that? Yeah, it's the original government building that was in Boston, and that's, I don't think, that's not James Otis's grave you're sitting next to, is it, Cece? No, it was just, you're just sitting down listening. Yeah. So just on the other side of Boston Commons from where the Freedom Trail was, we had to get our pictures in front of the Cheers sign. So, but we had just a short time there, and then we spent the night in Plymouth, and then the next morning we got up and we went and saw Plymouth Rock, and it really is that small. I don't, no way. There it is. Yep, that's it. The little information plaque that's next to it. Apparently, it used to be much larger, but at one time they'd moved it from the seashore into downtown, and apparently in the process of moving it, they dropped it and broke it. And then, as it became a more and more popular tourist destination, they used to have a chisel and a hammer chained to it so you could come and take your own little souvenir off of it. They realized that that was not sustainable, apparently. So anyway, we saw Plymouth Rock, and we saw the Mayflower 2, which is in the next slide. And we got there early, so we got a tour of it, and wasn't very crowded, so the girls got to ask questions about it and what living conditions were like on there. And I'll gladly say I'm glad I didn't have to ride over on it. Did not. Yeah, it's an operable it was built somewhere else on the East Coast, and they actually sailed it to Plymouth, but the challenge they have is finding a crew that actually knows how to work and sail a boat like that. So we then went and went and visited the Plymouth Plantation as well, and the girls got to have fun spreading gossip for one of the men in town that liked one of the young women, so they got to help do some chores, and it's kind of a living history place if you've not been there, sort of like Connor's Prairie. So the girls had a good time there. We'd originally planned on doing a whale watching tour when we were in Acadia, because there were several of them that went out from Bar Harbor. The day that we had a reservation for and were planning to go, it ended up being canceled because the seas were too rough. And it was busy enough in Bar Harbor that they had no other openings for the time that we were there. So we thought, oh man, that was kind of one of the things that I was looking forward to anyway. Well, while we were in Plymouth, I started looking, and there were actually some whale watching trips that go out from Cape Cod. So we were able to get scheduled with one of those and went down, and maybe it was meant to be. We ended up having a wonderful time, and got to see a lot of whales. I mean, it was a 4-hour trip, and it was about 45 minutes going out, and not quite, about 2.5 hours that we were out. And we've got hundreds of pictures, but you again can't capture everything. But if you've never been on a whale watching trip, these were humpback whales, and there were at least 4 of them that were feeding where we were at, and the captain and the naturalist that we had were really good, and we'd had some. kind of questions about, okay, is this a good thing or not? Because we'd heard that sometimes whale watching trips can be actually disruptive to the whales. But this one, it's a jet boat, so there's no propeller that's going to that could harm them. And they also, while we were close, they weren't getting so close that they were interfering with them.
When we were on the boat, I took a lot of the pictures that's on my mom's phone. And when we were in there, we wanted to get something to eat. And Mallory and Anna were a fan of the clam chowder, and I really liked their pretzels.
Anna and Mallory came out and watched for whales for a while, but they spent a little more time inside. And how many bowls of clam chowder did you have, Anna? Had 3? I thought so. You wouldn't guess from looking at Anna that food is one of her favorite things, but to have the metabolism, she does. So there's one of the pictures we had of a fluke and of the whale's tail coming up. Couldn't get pictures of all of it, but like when they're feeding, one of the things they'll sometimes do is blow bubbles to kind of chase the fish up. And so as they're starting to surface, sometimes as dark as the water is, all of a sudden you'd see a big circle that would go a light turquoise color. And it was just before that then that the whale would usually come up pretty close to where you saw that. And so that's part of what you're out there looking for. One of the neatest moments we'd had, they'd seen that, and one of the whales was almost coming straight at the boat. And it really, I mean, looking down, they've got these flippers that are 10, 12 feet long on their pectoral fins. And it was coming right toward the boat, and you just saw this huge white expanse of its flippers as it went and then dove like right under the boat on its next pass. And so it was really neat. Melissa and I, we'd stayed out on the deck, and with it being a jet boat, it moved along pretty good, and it was windy. So they'd said, all right, well, we need to head back in. So everybody turned around and went inside. And Melissa and I are on the side of the boat, and there's another couple down there. And all of a sudden, this whale just comes and breaches. And we're looking, and we look at the guy over there, we're like, did you just see that too? And I mean, it was probably the most that we saw one come out of the water. But then even after we're up to speed, Melissa and I are sitting out there talking and looking out. And again, and it wasn't one of the humpbacks, but we saw something else big come out of the water, and it's like everybody's inside and they're missing all of this. But anyway, yeah. So that was a fun part. So then after we'd been home, Mallory again did well enough at her zones to qualify for the junior national meet that was at the IUPUI Natatorium in Indianapolis. So she went and competed there. And you want to say something about it?
We were there for 2 days because the first day I had a practice warm up for it, and I brought my lanyard with all the pins of the places we went to, and my coach saw it. And the next day after nationals, Olympic diver Amy Kozak gave me 2 pins to put on my lanyard.
So Amy had been on the U.S. diving team in 2016, and she was there. I don't know if she was coaching or what, but she saw Mallory's, and she said, I've got something for you. And she came back and gave her 2 of the pins she had from the 2016 games. So Mallory did well. She did not place, but she is probably close to, if not the youngest person, because the way the age divisions work, it's under 11. And so she was actually 8 when she registered, so it's when your birthday is. So she actually has 3 more years to compete in this age division. So I suspect we'll probably be going back. So I had to move the date of when we were going to the Ozarks, or when I was planning to go to the Ozarks, because I would have been gone when her nationals were. And Melissa's like, well, I guess I'll just take her by myself. I'm like, no, I don't have any set schedule. I don't have reservations. So we pushed it back. But about 2 days before I was supposed to leave, Anna said, Dad, do you think I could go with you? And I said, well, okay. And Anna's not a terribly outdoorsy person, but she wanted to go. I thought, all right, well, we can sort this out. And Corinne, when we were in Maine, because she was liking the hiking so much, I had even asked her before we left Maine, I said, would you want to go hiking with me in Missouri? And right away she said no. And so Corinne missed the dog terribly while we were gone because they are buddies. So we thought, well, she must just be looking forward to being home, spending some time at the lake and seeing the dog. So when she heard that Anna was going, she got a little teary-eyed and said, I want to go too. I just thought you wanted to do it by yourself and I didn't want to spoil it. So things got changed around a little bit. So while we were in Indy for Mallory's diving, we made a quick trip to REI to get a 3-person backpacking tent, since that hadn't been a part of what I thought I needed. And so we got set up to go.
When we were doing the hiking with the big backpacks, mine was really heavy for me, and I couldn't do the belt strap any tighter, and that would have put the weight down a little bit more off my shoulders. So part of the way, Dad had to take some of my food out, and then it was hurting my shoulders again when we were coming up the mountain to come back to the car. So he took my backpack and he was holding it for a while.
So where I'd originally planned on hiking about 50 miles there, and I changed things around. Where we went was called the Bell Mountain Wilderness, and it was a wilderness. I mean, once we drove down a dirt road to the parking area, and it was about 3 miles off the main road. And we got to the parking area, and as we're getting stuff out of the car, I'm looking around and seeing a lot of little square pieces of broken safety glass from car windows. And I thought, gee, is this a good place to leave my car or not? But we went ahead and did, and everything was fine, thankfully. But it ended up being kind of a hike in around the mountain and back out. So we drove over there after Mallory got done diving on us Friday, got there, parked, and it was early afternoon, probably 2-3 o'clock. Hiked in about 4 miles, and go ahead and advance it, Ethan. So there's pictures of us on the trail, and go ahead and do another one. So we got in and got up to the top of this Bell Mountain, and we ended up making camp up there. Go ahead and do one more. So there's our tent. Leave it on that one for a minute. So go ahead, Cece. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. So when we were there, on the tree that's kind of cut off on the edge, Dad's backpack was hanging there, and some of the backpacks were there just before we were going to go to sleep. So his was hanging up, and I was getting something for Anna out of one of the backpacks, and Dad said, wait right there. And I was looking around, and I'm like, what? And there was a snake coming out of the back in between the backpacks, and it went around and under the tent. And Anna was in the tent, but then she came out so she could see it.
So she says it was a snake, but so on the left-hand side where that tree, my backpack is there, and when she's over there, I look over and I see it coming almost out from under my sleeping bag. It goes along the side of our tent and cuts under the corner of it and keeps going. Well, it wasn't just a snake, it was a copperhead. And so I was trying to get a picture of it on my phone, and I've got a couple of like shaky all over the place videos of it, but I didn't actually get a picture of it. But so yeah, that was the first day of hiking on both occasions. Venomous snakes, yeah. But it was a really gorgeous site to be able to camp up on there. I think go ahead and advance that. We had that beautiful view and ate dinner there and got up and had breakfast there the next morning. And so we'd hiked in that night before. Yeah, in that picture on the left, you can see Cece's backpack. She was just big enough to get an adult women's backpack, so it will last her the rest of her life as far as being usable for her. The only thing is she's still small enough right now that, as she was saying, she can't get the waist strap cinched quite tight enough to take some of the pressure off. So her pack got a little bit heavy for her, but we had about an 8-mile hike then out that next morning to head back to the car. Go ahead, CZ. So yeah, she said on that picture on the right, she has a cooling towel that she put over her shoulders because she had a tank top on, and that wasn't the best shirt to be wearing with the backpack straps. What were you going to say, Anna? Or did you have something you want to say? You want to tell them about your high point of camping on the top of the mountain? The what? What'd you have for breakfast? Again, it had to do with the food. So a lot of hiking meals are tear off the top, pour boiling water in it, seal it back up for 3 or 4 minutes, and it's ready to go. So one of Anna's favorite meals anyway is biscuits and gravy. So we camped on the top of the mountain, and she ate biscuits and gravy for breakfast the next morning. So, all right, Ethan. So we only did one night of wilderness camping, and then instead of hiking multiple days, we just did the one night, hiked in, hiked back out, and then we're going to head down to an area in the Mark Twain National Forest where there's a national scenic river area, and there's a state park tent only, or a national park tent only campground. And so on our way there, this is called the Garden of the Elephants. And so Anna was resting in the car, and Cece and I went and climbed around some of these boulders and stuff for a little bit. So there's our campsite. So the river the two rivers actually converged right below where our campsite was. So we camped there a couple of nights then and did some day hiking and different things. Come on up, Anna.
So that night that we got there, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go take a shower. And I'm looking like, because he had all the shower stuff in his black little duffel bag. And this duffel bag on the left. And I'm like, well, where is it at? So I asked my dad, well, where's the black duffel bag? And it was starting to rain when we left the hiking place where we slept in the tent. And he was like trying to get everything in the car. And he left that bag an hour and like 20 minutes away from where we were staying. So we have to get back in the car at like 10 p.m. at night and drive back. And while we're driving, there's something that just makes a thud off the car. And Cece goes, well, what's that? And we stopped the car and we look back, and he left his mug on the top of the car while we were driving away. He was completely losing his mind the whole day.
That might be overstating it. It was not my best day for sure. As I said, that day that we'd hiked out from Bell Mountain, there was a thunderstorm coming in, and I mean, it was rumbling and dark, and we were, getting pretty close to the car, and like, okay, we're going to make it. But when we got to the car, it started sprinkling, so I'm trying to get backpacks shoved in and stuff, and I pulled that duffel bag out and sat it next to the car. Well, it didn't go back in because I got all the backpacks in. I forgot to look next to the car. So thankfully, being gone all day, driving back, it was about 7 o'clock when we were headed back over there. It was 10 o'clock when we got back to the tent, but thankfully it was still sitting there. So anyway, go ahead, Ethan. So, okay, come on up, Cece. We did a canoe ride down the river one day, and that was a really neat river, very crystal clear water. I mean, you could see 7-8 feet down, and the fish swimming all over the place.
More by our campsite, we could get in the water and swim around over there, and the current was really strong, so it was like pushing us, and we went onto our back, and we went down the river a little ways.
Yep. So it was a pretty strong current. But we kind of did some day hikes at some other places. Go ahead and advance, Ethan. So like on that top left picture is one of the springs that feeds into the river. And it's just, I think they said it's 300 feet deep, but it's just this aqua-colored water. And it looks still right there, but it has about 90 million gallons of water a day that come up. And down below that, it's like raging rapids headed down to the river. And then, do you want to talk about the waterfalls?
So the one that's by it's called Rocky Falls, and we got to swim around and climb up there, and it was really fun. And we got to do four like kind of areas like that, and one of them was like this underground lake, and all you saw was like a hole in the ground with a crate kind of thing over it. And then what was the other one we went to?
So like I said, we did some little day hikes though to go and visit some different things in that area. So then I think the next one, yeah, they hit their limit. So yeah, and Cece never does. And I think from there then on our way back, we stopped at the Arch in St. Louis, and we got to walk around and walk through some of the museum and exhibits in there, but again, with restrictions and things and limits on numbers of people, it would have been almost a 3-hour wait to be able to get the ride up to the top of the arch. So we said, well, we'll just have to wait till we can all go back as a family and do that one together. It's easy.
So when we went up there, we were going to do it, but then we just didn't do it that day. So what we did was we got lunch, and well, we went to the gift shop before, and then we got lunch, and I had this big pretzel. Well, it wasn't shaped like the ark?
It was about as big as your head.
Yeah.
Yep, St. Louis pretzel. So those are the highlights of all of the pictures and things that we did. Now again, we spent time at our lake cottage in between, and so I didn't think to stick any pictures of that in because that's our happy place and kind of our place to unwind. And so if it wasn't swimming in a stream in Vermont or in the cold water in Maine, we were in the water at the lake and enjoying relaxing there. Yep. So and then Ashley there's a short video then, I think it's about 2.5 minutes that she put together that highlights some of the things that happened here at Aldersgate over the summer as well. So Ashley's skills are orders of magnitude better than mine when it comes to putting something like that together, but we did just wanted to be able to share some of the things we did. And part of the renewal leave is the question of what will make your heart sing, and so we got to do some things that we enjoy. For me, part of that I still need to finish is mapping out, okay, what's my rule of life? What are the things that I need to commit to on a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly, to sustain myself physically, mentally, spiritually for the work of ministry? And so some of those things are maybe things I already knew that this summer helped remind me of. Part of it is that while Mallory made the comment that, well, we get to see that at the lake all the time, one of the things that I was reminded of with that is that nature's all around us, and it's great to be able to go to some of those places and experience those things, but there's nature right outside the back door, and so I need to be intentional about even letting those moments be times that nourish and strengthen me as well. And one of the things that I've heard from some of you that participated in the things here at Aldersgate is, you know what, it was kind of nice doing some things outside of what our normal church activities in life are, like the boat ride, which I would like to do that again at some point, because I'd like to see that. But we need to be intentional about creating some of those opportunities more often for our church family as well. So again, thank you for participating and being a part of everything and supporting us and allowing us to have this opportunity ourselves.